So hi everybody, it's Steve Falcon Napier. Welcome to Circle of Brilliance. Today we're going to continue our discussion about happiness on the change grid. In the previous three sessions, we've talked about how happiness might express itself, and based on the various ways it could express itself, how do those overlay on the change grid? We talked a bit about whether that happiness is, is an illusion of happiness? Is it really something else that's just being packaged as happiness, or is it the real deal? And last time around, we talked about a model of happiness that you're looking at on the screen right now, Ben Shahar's model, about the hamburger model. So he would say that real happiness only comes from a situation where there is both a benefit in the present and in the future. And that these other three, hedonism, the rat race, and nihilism, would be kind of an illusion of happiness, but really something else is going on behind those. And we talked a little bit about that last time around. Any thoughts about what we've done so far, or things you want to throw in based on ponderings that have occurred to you? Or shall we jump into the next little chunk of this?
I sent you some stuff on happiness, I believe. Did you get a chance?
Yeah, I did start looking at all that. And so what I've done is I've kind of set that up for next Tuesday's call. Several of you have sent things over, and I think that they're going to be really interesting to look at.
And also, in today's word of the day email, I got a new word for the adjective, which is not there.
Okay, what's that word?
Sanguine.
Sanguine. Actually, sanguine was one of the personality types from way back when. When they were
optimistic or hopeful or confident.
Yeah. When they were dividing personalities into 4 different humors. And so I always made the joke that someone at some point in time decided to associate some disgusting body ooze with each of the 4 different personality types. So you could be phlegmatic and sanguine, and yeah, right.
Yeah,
and
I remember that.
Yeah, and so that was one of the models that was very much there for a good long while. Oh, Diane's joined us. Hi, Diane. Welcome. So today, I think it'd be interesting to kind of review what we were talking about for Ben Shahar's happiness model. Again, he's out of Harvard, so we have to at least believe he's got his head wrapped around whatever his concept is. And then I want to show you something out of positive psychology, which is not necessarily something that will overlay on the change grid as much as it will represent a set of techniques that one can use to help oneself or one's clients to enter and sustain a certain level of happiness as they go about doing whatever it is they're doing. So just to kind of put us back into where we were last time around, we were looking at the composite change grid. We were looking at Ben Shahar's model and saying, well, where do these actually live? And again, in his definition of happiness, you need to be doing something that brings you a benefit both in the present moment and in the future as well. And one of the things that he characterized as falling into that category was achievement of something. And so achievement of things tends to be the focus of someone who is in a healthy area outgrid. So if we are out here at coordinates 778899 in this general vicinity, either anywhere from the power point in the center all the way out to the edge of this red circle, we would be looking at that as a radial trend and saying that this is where someone has strong intentions. This is where they have very active engagement in what's going on. It tends to be more goal focused, and when that goal is met, they end up feeling pride. And one of the other things emotionally that comes along with the feeling of pride is a feeling of satisfaction, pleasure, happiness would come into play there as well. We did say, though, that Ben Shahar's model does not talk about when that becomes problematic. So his model seems to end at the beginning of the danger zone. So we would say that someone who becomes so focused on achieving things at the cost of health in other areas of their life may very well continue to represent their feeling as being truly happy, but it's a little bit, there's something else going on. So remember, this is the Algorithm danger zone is the domain of narcissism, and a narcissist, I'm sure, wouldn't hesitate to tell you how happy they are and how everyone should aspire to reach the same levels of happiness that they have, but it's a bit of an extreme. And again, Ben-Shahar's model doesn't take into account the extremes. Similarly, as he characterizes the hedonistic expressions of happiness, which would occur further downgrade, he doesn't talk about when that becomes a real problem. So we know the deep levels of depression live further downgrade on the change grid because someone's being underutilized. They don't have the mission, the purpose, etc. So there's a certain healthy awareness around that would then have you seek out the new mission, the new benefit, the new whatever. And what I wanted to throw out to everyone today is, based on that, I don't know that we would say that this is the domain of true happiness or happiness as a state of being. Nevertheless, these people may very well characterize themselves as being happy. But is it really they're happy because they're finding something new to become excited about, energized about, something more on the achievement side of things? Now, we could also say the people that are upgrade, part of the rat race, as far as his model is concerned. Again, rat race has plenty of future benefit, but no real benefit in the present moment. So they will sacrifice the pleasure of today in order to support the accomplishment of pleasure in the future. So these people are very satisfied, rewarded when they can solve problems, when they can fix things for the future. So even that implies that there's a certain level of accomplishment or achievement. But we said, really, what these people are experiencing that they characterize as happiness is the feeling that you get after you have successfully avoided pain, when you have somehow or another overcome it, avoided it, built a way around it. But this whole avoidance of pain kind of thing is really what's happening when you read his definition of rat race. And so one would question whether or not that is true happiness, or is that just an emotional release, some relief to what it is that you've been experiencing. And then just to finish this all off, the other possibility is nihilism, where there is no benefit in the present nor in the future. In fact, there is detriment in the present and in the future. And so they believe that there's no point in doing anything. Nothing's ever going to make any difference. Why bother? And then if you read what he would say is, in fact, the happiness one has there, it would be in the in-grid danger zone, not in the place on the in-grid that one would say is rather happy. So we thought he had a missed opportunity there to identify some situations where happiness could actually be waiting for someone. And as a reminder, this is where someone gives of themselves. They volunteer. They want to make a difference. Instead of accomplishing something, making something happen, they instead get pleasure out of supporting people as they go about making whatever it is happen. But his description would characterize the people that are very far in grid. And these are the people who live only in the moment, and living is not actually the accurate word. It's more about existing. So I'm doing that just as a recap so I could say that while his model seems to offer us some additional information about how happiness lays on the change grid, it leaves us with several questions. Those questions again are, what happens if this quest for achievement gets to an extreme? What happens if hedonistic behaviors reach an extreme? What happens if the rat race becomes a true extreme? You really are in danger. I mean, in the moment, you're in true life's danger. And what about this healthy part of being that amiable kind of energy that wants to give of oneself in the support of others and missions around others? So there you go. Thoughts about his model and these gaps that we've identified as we've overlaid it on the change grid. Anybody?
Me, the more I think about it, it sounds rather transactional and based on conditions. So the question that I ask is, what happens if you don't achieve? What happens if you get tired of the rat race, or you discover for yourself through experience that the rat race isn't it, or that the rat race is this continuum on a treadmill that you never get off until
Exactly.
on to the next
Exactly.
thing. So to me, it seemed like the true happiness in the center, you're detached from that. You can be happy just because you simply just are happy.
Right.
That might not be sustained necessarily, as is no emotion is forever. They all have a shelf life, but you can always go back to that point. That's why for me, I call it a return trip. It's like you're
Right.
going back inward and you're not subject to the externalities or even some of your own internal biases and those kinds of things. And you can transact in a way that's unique to you, that's unique to a behavior that you want to express, that's unique to your values, all those kinds of things that people say they want to do, but somehow can't find in a moment when they most need it.
Right. And again, I think what you're doing is giving some examples that help us realize there's a distinction between happiness as a response to something that you've encountered, that you're doing or whatever, versus happiness as a state of being. And I had a conversation with Diane. In fact, Diane, if you want, you can throw in all the details, that there is both an endocrine kind of an element supporting the happiness as a state of being, but there's also a long habit of doing those things that bring you happiness and bring you joy.
Right. And that's the
Uh,
complexity of these emotions, right? Because remember, I said in the emotional brain, so to speak, Joseph Ledoux studies, that's his basis in neuroscience. All emotions is multi-layered, right? So it starts out the feeling, but like what Diane is describing, that's the behavior also, right? So it becomes the habit that becomes commonplace. And so what starts out as a feeling can very easily turn into a behavior over time.
Right. And if it continues consistently enough, long enough, it could even be viewed as, something core to someone's personality or something core to their being.
Right.
So, but yeah, both those ingredients would kind of be present. Diane, thoughts about that?
I'm thinking in terms of maybe three-dimensional, or
Exactly.
or you are, most of us are familiar with like an AUC, area under the curve, or normal distribution. So that perhaps the idea of, okay, there's a big challenge. Okay, now I'm doing the challenge that gets some neurochemicals up. Then you've achieved the accomplishment. You're feeling good. And that lasts for a while. It is not ephemeral. I just had an example where I couldn't get into my phone, tried to change the password, had to drive to an Apple store, was told it was impossible without deleting the data. I said, what do you do with people who don't accept the first answer? They gave me a second genius. He gave me a similar answer. I say, okay, what's the step for people who don't accept that answer? They said data retrieval. I stood there, found a data retrieval right there on the phone and drove over to it. And something like ecstasy, at a sense of overcoming obstacles, that I felt so happy. But that is not ephemeral. So now I'm sort of under the dome, and maybe for the rest of the day, maybe for the rest of the week, I don't know how long it lasts. You feel good. You have a sense of competence. It affects your self-concept. It affects your interaction. It affects your energy level. Exactly. I like it right there.
That's exactly
So
where it is. Yep.
I think it's sort of like a curve, an arc that you live under. There are times when you move down or out, but maybe think of it as a canvas. Are you painting your life on a white canvas, a gray canvas, or a golden canvas?
Very good. I'll add to that once you've had that accomplishment or that achievement, even though the ecstasy of the moment may subside over time, when a similar situation occurs in your life next time around, you can recall
Yes.
that, and now it becomes an asset to do that as well. Like I did it before, I can do it again, and it'll be a different experience this time around.
And that's the
So
value of appropriating as Joseph Legault talked about in the Emotional Brain book, he delineates between emotional reaction and emotional response, right? And see, when that's appropriated in the most effective use, you can get to that point, what Diane just described. So then now you can account for that experience and the relevancy of it and duplicate it when you need it in the moment, right? Instead of waiting for it to happen.
Right. And just as a reminder, remember when we go over the change grid maneuvers, one of the down grid maneuvers, one of the things we do to lower tension is we restore resources. We remind ourselves or help other people remember that in the past they did have experiences, they did gain knowledge, they did have skills, and those skills can be summoned into the present moment, or those strings can be summoned into the present moment and applied to whatever situation they happen to be finding themselves in now. And so I really do think it's something that is with us forever. We just might lose either memory of it or we don't really know how to tap into it to get it present yet again. Now, as Diane just described that situation, if we were going to be looking at Ben Shahar's work, he would have said that's a rat race situation. So a problem has been put into your reality and you need to find a way to cope with it. And because you coped with it, you're going to feel a certain sense of satisfaction because you coped with it. But I believe from what Diana shared, and as we've started to talk about how this all integrates, the reward is in the fact that you have now accomplished whatever the task needed, that it really is moving here. And so making progress is a good thing. Make no mistake about it. Remember, if we look at the engagement rings, this is a person who's now fully aware of something, and then they formulate an intention to do something about it. Well, even moving from awareness to intention has a certain satisfaction to it because you're at least moving in a direction you believe can offer you resolution. But ultimately, for you to do what Diane described in the literal example, she had to get in her car and go. She had to track this down. She had to, whatever it is. Well, that's no longer up here. That's now finding the ability, finding the resources so that you can overcome whatever it is that was in front of you.
Same thing when I was locked out.
I'm sorry, just one second. Brian Shags, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Brian.
Oh, okay.
We talk a lot about this idea of being out of control or in control, right? So to me, what Diane was describing is being in control, even in the rat race. Right?
Well, yeah. So let me just add this. Up in stress, we're feeling out of control, and down here in power, where you ended up, is in control. Anyone remember what you're doing in power stress? What's the word to describe? No, shopping occurs in power. What happened? So up here you were out of control. Here you're in control. How did you go from being out of control to being in control? This is all on your cheat sheet. This is seizing control. And if you think about the way that Diane described her interaction with the people at Apple, she was seizing control of the situation. She was saying, what do you do with people who don't accept the first answer? Well, we do this, and then what do you do? So she's really seizing control in order to advance things in her direction. So, other people might have been moved up grid instead of Diane choosing to be moved out grid. And they could have said, well, there's nothing I can do. And they could have just thrown up both hands and walked out of the Apple store, never to retrieve their phone data again.
So she's choosing how to participate in that.
Exactly. And so that's a problem-solving behavior. And we all know that active problem-solving lives slightly up-grid. I mean, up very far in the up-grid danger zone. You're truly in a life or death situation. So I would believe something more instinctual is being triggered. But here, this is where all of your cognitive processes are being summoned in. You still have a lot of emotional stuff that could be compromising that, but nevertheless, you're starting to pull into that logic. And as you decide to seize control, decide to steer the ship, advancing your perceived ability as you find those resources, you are moving to this section that Ben Shahar would say, that's happiness, because there's a benefit in the present and there's a benefit in the future. So, but when he says there's happiness here, here, and here, I think that happiness is it's more of an illusion, I think, or it's just a word someone is using to describe, well, how they're feeling, but is it truly happiness? Shags, Diane, thoughts to throw in?
I'm laughing because as I went through this yesterday, I knew that I was going to join your call today. And I came home thinking, I'm feeling happy. Now, how is T going to analyze this? But I'm
Yes.
feeling happy for the rest of the day. I'm enjoying how you're analyzing this.
Excellent, excellent. And by the way, you know, you guys all know I spent a good deal of time with Diane on cruise ships, and I can tell you that for Diane, and Diane, you can tell me if I'm framing something incorrectly. When Diane achieves happiness, the task is complete. She's happy. We're done.
Yeah.
We're done with, there's no reason to think any further about it. I'm happy. So
Right, and then it lingers. It lingers.
Right.
And by the way, it becomes contagious.
Yep.
The people that I'm around feel the energy, the smile, the enthusiasm. So I don't know, I'm hooked on it.
And I'm more engaged in what's the mechanism that just happened here? How did this come to be? Because is it something that's duplicatable? Is it something that we can bring to a client to help them get into more of this true state of happiness? There's
and
a lot
that's
of
why
you.
we enjoy each other so much,
There you
because
go.
I'm doing it and you're analyzing it.
There it is. So, all right. So there's others on the call. You're all welcome to unmute and chime in anytime you want. So do feel free to add whatever your insights happen to be.
Relate to what Diane went through, because yesterday or the night before, I noticed that I could not get into email on my small notebook.
Mhm.
I was locked out. I thought, well, maybe it's a password delay, might not be linking up or syncing up with Firefox. So I deleted Mozilla and then reinstalled it. Same problem. Went back to my other computer and I was locked out of email on the main one.
Oh,
So I went to another browser and I was locked out on that. Went to a third, I was able to get in. And so I called GoDaddy, and it was just, I was more relieved than happy.
Well, right. And that's what we're saying. When people encounter an upgrade puzzle, they may describe what they're feeling as happy, but is that really just a release, a relief that came from getting out of the pain? And that's another thing Diane talked a lot about on the cruise, is like happiness comes from either adding something that brings you pleasure or overcoming something, avoiding something that would be bringing you pain. Well, the pain is upgrade. So, yeah. And so if you think about what Shags just shared, he started out confronted with an issue. That issue in that moment represented a reasonably high level of challenge and put his perceived level of ability in question. And so he said, well, all right, first thing I'm going to do is X. And he did X, and X didn't seem to make much of a difference. So he didn't throw up both hands and end up further upgrade. He went like, well, what could I do next? What could I do next? What could I do next? And as he worked on these things of recovering the abilities that he had learned about in the past, if not practiced in the past, his perceived level of ability went up. And sooner or later, he was the boss of the bus when it came to that issue. And I assume you got into your email sooner or later, and now you're taking the issue up with whoever.
But the problem was it's set up under my domain name, but I was not the owner of the account initially because it was through a mass set up by an ISP administrator 20 years ago. And when it got migrated over from GoDaddy to Office 365, you lose all.
Right,
content.
because you're not the administrator of record, you're not whatever, and so we got to talk to that person. That person's 20 years ago. So, yeah. All right. So anyway,
still a friend though.
Yeah. So again, I'm just reiterating this just to say that while Ben Shahar would say that this is a unique type of happiness, and that there are people who live in this place on the change grid, they live in this rat race with current detriment but future benefit, and they're happy. And I take issue with that. I think that that's not what we're really thinking about when it comes to happiness as a state of being. Are we in agreement on that? Or you guys have anything you want to throw out around that?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Also, remember, we also said that he might talk about 4 quadrants, but we know there are an infinite number of, uh, of places between those quadrants. So last time we also talked around that right here between that rat race area he was describing with this happiness area, this is where the world of romance lives. Schmoozing and flirting and, you know, doing whatever you can do, because there is a puzzle to overcome. So romance is a pursuit, you know, there's a ritual, a mating ritual that's in play. And that applies in personal relationships. It also applies in business dealings. Well, you've got to work what you got. And so turn on the charm, turn on the whatever. Well, that's one of those things that's happening. Now, people might say that when they're in the act of being that way, that they're happy. They're having fun. They're meeting interesting people and doing interesting things. Are they accomplishing something? Maybe they're accomplishing something incrementally, because now they went from seeing someone to speaking with someone to, you know, getting to know them a little bit better. And so there might be some version of happiness that's living there as well. Okay, so we can go all the way around the change grid and we can come up with situations to bring that into question again. But what I wanted to do on today's call was to introduce another model to you. And I'll just go ahead saying, like, I don't think the model overlays as easily as many of the models we've looked at do. I think this is more about a model of dealing with someone, as opposed to a model that's trying to describe somebody. So this is a little bit more action oriented. So I'll put it up on screen. This is the work of Martin Seligman, who's considered to be, yeah, go ahead, Diane.
Well, I'm thinking about the happiness model, which is once you've achieved something, then you feel good enough to try the next one. And you just demonstrated that exactly. You present something that's complex, people in the group chew on it, think about it, say, oh yeah, I get it. And just when we get it, you give us another one.
Yeah, there you are. And I have a pile of them that will be heading your way. So, because, well, in fact, you know, if we rewind a little bit, I forgot where I put it diagram wise. There's so many things in this stack right now. But remember, we were talking about the, oh, good grief, the slow model, SLOWW. And they present things as a bit of a hierarchy that ends up in joy, but it's presented as a linear model. And we were looking at it going like, no, I can see how these adjectives will appear in different places on the change grid, but one does not necessarily move through them like you would go through Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So again, any model that's, you know, has passed muster is going to bring us things that are worth looking at and things that could be integrated. And by doing that, our model is enhanced. And we also like to think that our model will in turn enhance their model by bringing some awareness that they weren't really looking at. So when I looked at this one, I thought, okay, Seligman's been around for a good long while. He's considered to be the father of positive psychology. He's written umpteen books on the subject. He was at some point with the University of Pennsylvania. He may still be, but hasn't he been around longer than our grandparents? I mean, he's not a young man.
Yes, he got the Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Psychological Association for doing work on happiness, but also psychoneuropharmacology, which is how your mood affects your immune system. So he was one of the founding members of that in New York, probably in the 70s. I'm old, so I remember that.
So he's been around for a while. And by the way, although this came up when I did a search for models of happiness, when you really look at what this PERMA plus V model is, it's really about wellness. And he would say that, or he would pose the question, does wellness lead to happiness? Does happiness lead to wellness? Or are they independent things? So, yeah.
I think it's connected.
Yeah, but does one lead to the other? Do they coexist? Is one the
Yeah.
driving force and one's the response? And so I thought, all right, well, let's take a look at his PERMA model. And in the PERMA model, by the way, let me just do this real quick. I can probably chat this over to you guys, but found this on a website. It's, it's not his website, but nevertheless found this. And I ended up creating, oh, it's a PDF. I can just drag it to all y'all. All y'all, that's the plural of y'all. We're wondering about that. Let me go to chat here for just a second. Oh, he's 79 years old now, Shags. Thank you for looking that up. All right, I'm going to drag this. It's a PDF file. Not particularly large, but I've just, oh no, just a second. I didn't send it to everybody. One more time. Sooner or later, I'll get the hang of how Zoom actually works. All right, so you guys should have that appearing in your chat window. Again, if you might need to go to your main control strip and make sure you have a chat window open, but it'll be there and you can download it. But it's just something I found online. It's not Seligman's website. But nevertheless, it's got the nice diagram, and then they kind of go through and talk about what each of these, they say, listen to this. The PERMA plus V model is the core of Dr. Martin Seligman's well-being theory. It's an acronym that defines the 5 factors that contribute to a person's well-being and happiness. Meanwhile, there are 6 of them. And so what I do know is vitality is not one of the first 5. It used to be called the PERMA model, P-E-R-M-A, and then someone at some point added the 6th element for vitality as being part of it. So now, even though he says that this contributes to a person's well-being and happiness, happiness itself only exists up here as one of the positive emotions. So happiness, optimism, confidence, and pleasure. I, by the way, would not have thought of pleasure as being an emotion as much as I think it's a response to something that you're having, going on with all that. But, who am I to question his labeling system? Oh, that's right, I'm me, I can do that. So, and then he talks about that engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement is there. So because of the discussion I'd had with Diane, that seems to really be leaning towards achievement as one of the primary vehicles through which one can achieve happiness, I thought, well, he's got 4 others at least. Let's see how these all fit together, and then we'll see. Now, again, I don't think this overlays, but when it comes to a model for interacting with a client, if you want to help a client to become happier, which, by the way, is Diane's goal with me, because I represent a puzzle that she considers to be engaging enough to bother trying to fix. So
this model, T, everything on here is interconnected to me. Like if we if we just think about how the body itself functions, right? You can't talk about one system without understanding its impact on another system. That's just how we're taught in medical school. It's called structure function integration. So we know just by law of proximity, one system's going to have a particular effect on another system. That's what makes a hormone a hormone. It's secreted from one area or originates in one area, but it can impact the entire body function system.
That's right. That's right. Well, and to show how,
or it's both and.
Right. And so that would mean that if someone's approach to achieving and sustaining happiness in their own life depends on only one or a couple of these 6 possibilities, they're still going to be out of balance. And that out of balance is going to, at the very least, represent areas of life that are challenging their happiness state of being. So how do they handle it? So let me give you an example of this. So you guys know I work out with a personal trainer. Personal trainer has been very successful in competitive bodybuilding. And so if I look at these 2 things about vitality and achievement, he's very much about nutrition and energy management. I mean, he's got this stuff down, and obviously he's has a profession that's around this as well. So things are very, very solid over here. And when it comes to achievement, achievement, he's got the trophies, he's got the pride, he's satisfied, there are rewards, there is accomplishment. This is all very, very fine. But he would be the first person to tell you that in order for him to, one of the costs of him achieving what he's achieved is that all of his relationships fell apart, resulting in a divorce, difficulty having other relationships because of the amount of time and energy that these two kind of require, because you can't just go out to dinner if you're on a strict nutrition program. It becomes very, very difficult. And so he would probably say to you that he's out of balance. And so while you might be happy in certain areas, is it possible to be truly happy if there is unhappiness or this lack of balance thing occurring in your life? So I just threw that out there. Y'all can talk about it. So what are you thinking?
I think one is going to impact the other, because remember, when we talk about interoception, the whole idea of the nervous system is always monitoring the homeostatic balance of things, right? And so it's surveying your interaction with externalities. And so a lot of times the disruption isn't necessarily something external, it could be internal. So when scientists are studying emotions, they don't study what we call feelings, they study triggers. Like what triggered it? Is it internal? Is it external? Where is it triggered? And why is it triggered? That's why some of the best people, like Diane and others, they have laboratories where they can see these things playing out in real time, and even scan the brain and see what parts of the brain are ignited during particular images and those kinds of things. So that gives you the best result in terms of and understanding what's doing what and why is there.
Exactly. And it is a very integrated response. I'll just chime in because I seem to be the historian for the group. The name of the group, I said it wrong, is Psychoneuroimmunology. He said in a very early interview that, this is back in the 70s, that if he had his life to do over again, he would develop, because he partnered with Salk, of the Salk vaccine for polio. Yes. This was that group in New York. And he said if he had to do his life over again, he would work on inoculating people against depression. Because what he saw in working with Salk was the combination, just as I think that was Brian was saying, of how your psychological state and feeling is affecting your immune system. And some of the early work, which was fascinating, was showing how people under stress somehow exude a chemical that coats the white blood cells and renders their effectiveness lowered, their immune competency, that's the word. T cells, Bursar cells, macrophage, it renders them less immunocompetent, which is why when we feel stressed before going on a vacation and then we get to wherever it is, we're sick and have snivelly sneezes. So I'm agreeing that it's very important that we see this as bidirectional, interactional, everything is affecting everything.
Let's think about like when you're upset, and I don't know if any of you ever tried to eat when you're upset, right? So that stressful situation itself robs the energy of the gastrointestinal area for digestion. And so literally you get like a lump in your throat when you're trying to eat, when you're stressed out.
Yes.
Yep. And so I guess the question now is it possible for someone to be in a full state of happiness if they are missing one or more of these elements. Is the whole point that, I mean, he's talking about this as a model for wellness, well-being and happiness. So I understand that he's saying we've got at least these 6 different areas to be looking at. And if we can achieve some degree of balance in these, then we're going to be well and we're going to be happy. So is it necessary? Now I'm going to share something with you that Diane and I have chatted about in the past. And that is that we were talking about the kind of clients that we tend to work with as ChangeWorks professionals versus the kind of clients that she tends to work with as a clinical psychotherapist. And one of the things that she shared, no details provided, but nevertheless, one of the things she shared was that there seems to be a pattern in some part of her client base where the individuals are highly accomplished. They've achieved a whole lot. No one's going to look at them and question whatever it is that they've done, but they're just really lousy at relationships. And so there's, things are falling apart there. And I think there was another one where it was more about the person feeling like disconnected from the work that they had been doing. Maybe they sold the company or whatever, and now they were feeling this void. But I forget, but the big one I remember was they'd achieved everything, but their relationship sucked. So Diane, did they come to you because they wanted to do better at the relationships, or they just wanted to be allowed to focus on the achievements? So any thoughts about?
I think the in general, just generalizing, the people in the relationship, the other party, were saying, you need to go get some help because you're not doing this very well, and I might leave you. And by the way, another footnote, historical footnote, is I believe that Albert Einstein, a long time considered one of the smartest brains on the planet, wrote his 5 papers when he was very young and involved in a romantic and then marriage relationship. When his wife left him, he never wrote another new paper.
Interesting.
Yep.
She was his muse. Right.
Well, it's that all the pieces fit. After that, I mean, all the pictures we see of him with the bushy white hair and the no socks and the Yale or wherever, he's explaining his work. He didn't come up with any new work. He was teaching his work because the relationship was over. So he filled that void with teaching.
Right. And see, that's why I read his biography, as I tend to do of these kinds of people, because I'm interested in the underlying behaviors. And one of the things that, like T, what you're describing is we can only see things in part. That's all we have the conscious energy to do, right? So when we're experiencing these things, we have a conception of them for now. Happiness, joy, satisfaction, those kinds of things are meant to be experienced over time. It's not a one-off thing. And so that's why it's important to understand the integration of that, how it's coming together, because again, not only does, acetylcholine will help you put the spotlight on what you need to learn from the experience so that you can duplicate it again. So it's not just going through these things just to go through them and then say we're happy and then we can't apply it to the next event. Because then now our happiness we become conditionists. It's based on a condition that we can't control. So it has to be that we learn from it, and we can only see things in part. The conscious parts of our brain doesn't operate as fast as many of the processes in the limbic system. So we don't see it. We come to. But we're literally, when you look at how the brain processes, we're designed to feel the experience first.
Interesting. Okay, great. All right, well, let me scroll through this document again. Hopefully you guys went ahead and grabbed the PDF file that I sent over to you, but down here, just giving some simple definitions. So positive emotion is perhaps the most obvious connection to happiness. Focusing on positive emotions is the ability to remain optimistic and view one's past, present, and future from a constructive perspective. One of the things that I asked Diane about is that when people live in a state of being, we'll call happy, they happen to just be innately happy people. When they do encounter challenges in their life, does that happiness state of being change the frame around which they view the challenge? And or does the challenge or certain challenges derail them, take them away from their happiness state of being? So Diane, any thoughts about that before we?
Oh, I think that falls under the learned behavior. I mean, now that I got the Apple guy to give me a different solution, I'm going to be less intimidated by tech problems or Apple problems, so that it adds to your sense of self-confidence, your self-image. Scroll back up. Accomplishing adds to your perception of yourself. And somewhere I read years ago, again, about the success syndrome, because they had written about the failure syndrome. And success syndrome is looking at a task that is just beyond your level of comfort, achieving it, patting yourself on the back versus looking for acknowledgement from others. And then you, since you learned that doing that made you feel good, like a chipmunk, you kind of look around for the next one. And so just like failure syndrome brings people down time after time. Oh, this didn't work. It won't work. I'm not good at this. This didn't work for me last time. Success syndrome builds momentum on itself because of learned behavior and your changing self-confidence. How does that sound?
It sounds absolutely right, because that's also at the heart of gamification. If you think about any video game, even if we're just playing Wordle, I mean, Wordle at least had the sense to limit to one a day, because they know that once we solve that problem, we want the next one. We want the next one. Let them get increasingly difficult, and we will develop the skill necessary to conquer whatever it all happens to be. And so that's very interesting.
Midnight.
Yeah, well, exactly right. Exactly right. So, and again, you know, it goes back to dopamine. Every time you solve a Wordle and you were like, hey, good for me. Okay, somebody just got a little drop of dopamine as their reward.
Yes.
It's fun today.
Go ahead, Shags. What were you saying?
It was fun today.
Yeah, well, yesterday was not fun. So.
Well, another thing about the Wordle is, I always go, I got it in 3. How did you do?
Right, going back to gamification, turning into a little bit of a competition. First of all, you keep track of your own statistics, or it keeps track of your personal statistics for you, and so it's you against the game. You've got that going on. Plus, it can be you against others, and then everybody, for whatever reasons, decided to start sharing their Wordle results on Facebook. So now we're kind of broadcasting the whole world, you know. Look, I guessed a 5-letter word.
In terms of this interconnectedness of this here, and what we've been talking about, because I always see those kinds of things in terms of accomplishments. It creates a stack, right? So you become very skillful at not only spotting a pattern or opportunity, but how you can engage in an opportunity. These kinds of things build momentum of that success that Diane was talking about. It builds momentum to experience happiness more rather than less. So you start to stack behaviors, stack habits toward that direction.
Yep. Well, and I would kind of wonder, you know, how these things would plot out on the change grid, because I could certainly see that achievement is outgrid. We've already talked about that. But before we can actually accomplish something, we have to be engaged in it. So unless we're just going to accidentally accomplish something, you know, there needs to be that the awareness leading to the intention to do something. And then you get engaged in the doing of whatever it is that needs to be done. And you do it, you know, properly, and you end up achieving whatever it happens to be. I'll give you another Diane example. Diane derives great joy from taking photographs of the performers on stage on the cruise ship. And she's got this amazing camera. It's little teeny tiny kind of a thing for what it does. It's amazing, but oh my gosh, does it take astounding quality photographs without flash being used. It's phenomenal. And then whether the next port of call, is, ready for modern life or not so much, Diane will find a place on that island to get those photos printed out so that she can come back and that night start distributing these photos to everybody. So when I think about that, it's kind of like, well, the achievement has to have been preceded by the engagement. You had to be focused on getting whatever it happens to be. So, yeah. So, and you should see the looks on their faces when she gives them these photographs. So, because no one's ever done that, because no one's going to spend their time on an island hiring a taxi to take you, halfway across the island to get to the one place where you can print out pictures. So,
and then the joy is compounded when I hand them the photo and then I hand you the camera and say, could you please take a picture of me giving them the picture?
There you go.
So I have a memory of the joy. So yes, you asked me because you like to analyze it. I just experience it. And I said, it's a fantastic accomplishment to produce the photos in Antigua or wherever.
Right.
And then it's a wonderful accomplishment to find the performer, give it to them, and bring them joy. It's like being Santa Claus going down a chimney.
Right, right. And you guys have to understand this, that she's taken the pictures. We get on this island. She has already had to research, even got the concierge involved in trying to figure out where to get something printed. And then she doesn't think twice about dropping $50 on for the taxi each way to end up getting 20 photos printed out that cost her $20. It's astounding. Oh, by the way, this has taken her 2 hours, by the time it's all done. But I just bring this up just to say, I wonder if some of these things can be sequenced to say that if people are struggling with achievement, do I try to focus on these achievement elements that have been listed here, or do I recognize achievement requires engagement? How do I get them engaged? And maybe I need to start with meaning and say that what's going to drive the engagement is that you find whatever the task is meaningful in some way. Yeah. And maybe the meaning is actually preceded by relationships.
Perfect. So when I'm doing this with clients, and they say, oh, I have to do this and it's hanging over my head. I say, how good will you feel when you get it done? Because remember, I'm a cognitive therapist. So I just change the thought from, oh, this is an onerous, mind-boggling, boring task, to how good will you feel when you get it done? And they can visualize it.
Right. And so to kind of put that into the sequence, ending up where Diane's just ended up, it would be maybe something starts off with a desire to improve a relationship or add a relationship. Maybe meaning came first and the meaning led you to the relationship. So I could see how either one of these might start it. But then I need to get engaged in doing whatever it is that needs to be done, achieve it so I can have these positive emotions as my reward.
And it probably adjusts itself a little bit too. So, I don't know, Diane, I know there's been a lot of conversation about, does the thought come first or does the feeling, and that kind of dynamic, but I think they certainly, we know they work together.
Yes.
The image in your mind, and then once you get the thoughts and then the feeling, that's going to shift when you actually engage. Because like I said before, when I started foster parenting, I like youth, but youth that comes from troubled backgrounds took a little bit of effort.
Right.
So, it shifted. It didn't take away the happiness per se, but it did take some time to adjust and acclimate myself to a new way of understanding that. So I had to repurpose it, like what Diane did, is just change the frame so now you can engage. So I would think there's an image and there's all these kind of preceding things that you're describing, T, that comes into like the culmination of something that you can experience.
Because ultimately you have to go from being unaware of something to being aware of it. And once you're aware of it, you could just be done there. You could say, now that I'm aware of it, I have an intention. and that intention leads to some sort of action being taken, that engagement piece, and ultimately we accomplish it. So I do think that there is a process that's going to be invoked as you start doing this. But just to finish this off, we only have a minute or two before we're done for today. But what I didn't find anywhere in what I've been able to read is about this vitality element and where it fits in. But I'll go back to the thought that they said there are 5 factors that contribute to well-being and happiness. And those 5 factors are this PERMA, P-E-R-M-A, not vitality. That's why it's called the PERMA plus V. Well, the work that we've done with several of you guys might know David Chinsky. He's one of our ChangeWorks pros. He talks, he's the head of the Leadership Fitness Institute. One of the things that David says is that until you get this vitality piece in place, until you appreciate why vitality is such an important factor, you may not be able to pursue any of these other things.
Exactly.
Or if you have a compromise in vitality, these are going to be compromised. So if you're not sleeping well, and I know they've only added 4 for each, but there could have been 40 here that would belong to vitality. If you're not sleeping well, if you're not eating well, if you've become a couch potato, well, what's that going to do as far as your interest, if you will, in achieving something, or your desire to go out there and get into relationships or engage in doing sorts of things. So he would say that this is foundational.
Absolutely.
To whatever's
I will agree, and that's the physical part of my Venn diagram. And I can tell you many of my clients that I refer to go get a checkup have either low thyroid, vitamin B deficiency, vitamin D deficiency, or using the new gene test, they have the methylfolate conversion gene is deficient. So I agree absolutely that that's why the physical is on the bottom of my Venn diagram.
And so in this physical, would you also then want to add in that everyone does have certain neurochemistry that's in play, and we need to make sure that that's understood, factored in, brought into balance or whatever, because that could very much undermine any and all of these other 5.
You start there. Because what Diane just described, if your thyroid is out of balance, your hormones are off, that throws everything off. You can eat the most nutritious meal you can find. It's not going, because you're talking about the things that regulate your metabolism. So
right. Well, and I'll finish with one last Diane example from the cruise that we were on, because it's going to illustrate something I think really is important. Diane had a hitch in her get along. So she had this funny little pain in her thigh, and it would really affect her when she had been sitting for a while, and stand up and try to move. And so just a little hitch in her get along. Now, she did not allow that to interfere with her happiness or with what she was trying to accomplish, achieve, et cetera, because she was doing speaking engagements on board and all that sort of stuff. But it was there as this underlying issue. And so it's interesting how sometimes maybe it's just having a little hitch in your get along. Maybe if you, sprained your ankle, this is impacting vitality, which can in turn undermine a lot of these other elements that would contribute to your happiness equation.
Comparing Diane, the pro, to average person that may not have that kind of threshold. And so that's where the difference would be. We all have different tolerances and
but once again, it was overcoming the obstacle. Somebody mentioned that it could be, what was it? Not manganese. The one starts with an M.
Magnesium.
Magnesium.
Right.
I remembered that magnesium is very high in chocolate. She brought me some magnesium supplement. Plus, I started taking a multivitamin, which I had forgotten to take on the trip. And fortunately, they leave chocolate on your pillow every night. And it took, I don't know, a couple of days. It gradually just kept getting better because I saw it as an obstacle. And again, I'm envisioning how good will I feel when I get this thorn out of my side.
Right. And meanwhile, I'm asking her questions because I want to understand the underlying process that has led to this pain even existing. So yeah, I'm not a doctor, but I did my best to use Dr. Google to figure out what was really going on.
To me, like either sciatica or bone-on-bone arthritis in the hip.
Well,
It's arthritis in the hip. It turns out I had an x-ray and I have a bone spur.
Don't put off the surgery if you're in pain, because I did for a year and it was the worst year of my life.
Yep, there you go.
But did you dose with chocolate?
There.
No, because it kept me up at night and dwelling on the pain.
Oh yeah, there you go. That's when you know it's time to stop microdosing chocolate and going and getting the problem actually taken care of. Okay, anywho, there you go. So thank you all very much for joining in. We'll pick up where we left off next week, because the question we still need to get to is, how does this fit into our practices? So it's great to understand happiness, and we'll get into how does happiness get elevated into joy, into ecstasy. Why do we have all of these adjectives, and how do we proceed through the transition, I guess, between those different adjectives? How do we do that? What contributes to it? How do we use this with our clients? So at a certain point in time, all this needs to be made practical, or I don't know why I'm doing it. Okay, there you go. So thanks, everybody. Take care. We'll talk again very soon. All right, bye, everybody.
Thanks, Pete.
Bye. Take care. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Bye.